Hey my friends, how's it going? Welcome to another video on the channel. Today I'm bringing you complete coverage of everything that happened this race weekend at the Emilia-Romagna GP, held at the historic Imola circuit. We had a lot of news regarding car updates, and the practice sessions were an important part of this preparation, especially for Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, McLaren, Aston Martin, and other teams that brought new parts. First of all, make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any details this weekend. And if you enjoy this video, give it a like to support our work. Without further ado, let's get into what happened on the track. As soon as the 60-minute clock started, almost all the cars went out on track immediately, making it crowded and resulting in many drivers getting in each other's way. In the first session, we had Berman driving the Haas car in place of Kevin Magnussen. It was a trial by fire for him, as he hopes to secure this spot for the next season. Early in the first practice, the McLaren cars took the opportunity to run tests since they brought improvements from Miami, but had little time to understand these updates better. They used various configurations in the first few minutes, stopping in the pits, swapping parts, and going back on track, trying to maximize the car's performance. At Alpine, there were complaints from the start about the car bouncing too much, especially on the straights, a problem also faced by the Aston Martin cars. At Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton was the first to test one of this weekend's novelties, the increased gravel areas at the track edges, which immediately punished drivers who exceed track limits. In the previous edition, in 2022, much of the runoff areas were paved. Speaking of runoff areas, 20 minutes into the session, we had the first red flag of the weekend when Alex Albon's Williams had problems and lost all its power, forcing him to stop on the grass and abandon the session. Another complicated weekend for Williams. At that moment, George Russell was the fastest, with Oscar Piastri in second and Lewis Hamilton in third. About 7 minutes later, the track was cleared again, with around 30 minutes left. The Ferrari cars showed good performance in this restart, staying well ahead of the other teams, with Mercedes close behind and Tsunoda surprising with some fast laps. Fernando Alonso and his updated Aston Martin were out of the top 10 due to the tests the team conducted using aero rakes in some laps to better understand the new parts. With 20 minutes remaining, many drivers were still struggling on the track, trying to find the limits. Lewis Hamilton, for example, almost crashed his Mercedes but managed to save it at the last moment. With 15 minutes remaining, most drivers were testing race pace, using hard tires and doing longer runs with heavier cars. Max Verstappen, on the other hand, decided to test qualifying pace, complaining a lot about braking difficulties after the straights due to the car bouncing abnormally, making several mistakes and going off track repeatedly, which is unusual for him. Red Bull brought major updates, including a new floor, but by the end of the session, Verstappen couldn't manage a significant lap, finishing in 5th place, with Sergio Perez ahead of him. Ferrari had the most balanced cars in this first practice session, with Leclerc being the fastest and Carlos Sainz in third, while George Russell was in second. The rookie Berman did well, finishing in 15th place, while his teammate Hülkenberg was last. The McLaren cars were also a bit off the pace, so we'll have to wait a bit longer to understand the true performance of this new car. In the second practice session, the teams took advantage of these 60 minutes to make the most important adjustments, as it is held at a similar time to the qualifying and the race. So, the teams test these main adjustments during this session. Early on, we saw McLaren conducting more tests during their first attempts, using that yellow-greenish paint, certainly still trying to better understand the new parts and updates on the car. Max Verstappen, who struggled in the first practice session, complaining and making several mistakes, started this session much better, stating that the car was more balanced, allowing him to set good times right from the start. The two Williams cars took a long time to leave the garages, remaining disassembled even several minutes after the session started. There was doubt if they would be able to participate in the second practice. Recall that Albon had a car failure in the first practice and stopped in the middle of the track, while Sargent had no problems. But Williams did not explain why he wasn't sent out immediately. Only after 30 minutes of practice were both cars released for their first laps, wasting valuable time. Yuki Tsunoda has shown good performance in both sessions and deserves attention. always being close to the front cars with his AlphaTauri, apparently adapting well to the Imola circuit. Ferrari started this practice well, with their two drivers setting fast laps and contending for the top position, with Leclerc standing out in the initial minutes. On the other hand, McLaren was quieter in the first 30 minutes, with the drivers unable to complete a clean lap. Only at the 30-minute mark did Piastri manage to move up to second place. After the initial 30 minutes, Max Verstappen again complained a lot about the car, which started well but then completely lost balance, making it difficult to execute fast laps. The Mercedes cars were threatening to set good laps, but always faced some problem just before completing the lap, indicating that, on a perfect lap, they could get closer to the front cars. With 10 minutes left in the session, the Red Bull cars were still struggling, with Verstappen losing a lot of time in the pits trying to make adjustments, going out on track only in the final minutes for a few more attempts at a fast lap. On a tight and narrow circuit like Imola, we frequently saw cars getting in each other's way. Several drivers were called in to explain their maneuvers after the session, which could cause headaches during qualifying. Despite several updates, Aston Martin did not show good performance, with their cars near the 10th position, about a second slower than the top grid cars. Williams also had weak performance, as did AlphaTauri and Alpine, which were below expectations. With the session time over, Leclerc's Ferrari was the fastest car, to the delight of the Italian fans, with Oscar Piastri in second and Yuki Tsunoda in third. Completing the top 10 were Lewis Hamilton in fourth, George Russell in fifth, Carlos Sainz in sixth, Verstappen only in seventh, Sergio Perez in eighth, Nico Hülkenberg in ninth, and Fernando Alonso in 10th. It looks like we could have many surprises this weekend, as Red Bull is clearly having trouble adjusting their updated car and will have only one more practice session to improve. Let's keep an eye on everything. Tell us in the comments what your expectations are for this weekend. Do you think Red Bull can be defeated again?